Good afternoon, everyone. It's pretty loud. I am a corporate lawyer, a litigator, a feminist, and what's known as a sexual harassment lawyer. Now, some of you may wonder, what is a sexual harassment lawyer and how did she get into that line of work? In 1974, I was a student at Yale University, and there was on the campus quite a brutal strangulation and rape of a woman. This became discussed around the university because when the woman student went to the police to explain what had happened and to try and get justice, the police said to her, "Wait a minute, you knew this person who had sex with you, you had dinner with him, you went to the movies, and then you let him come back to your room, and then he strangled you and raped you?" And she said, "Yes." And they said, "Well, we don't do anything about that. That's really not a rape. That's a maybe confusing event." And she said, "No." And so I tried to help her and explain to people why this would be a very serious crime. It should be prosecuted. And I called it, this behavior, date rape. And that became something that in America caught on. The term date rape caught on like a house afire. And people said, okay, now we understand that even in friendships, women can be raped. And it became a very burning topic. Now that still exists today. Later on when I was at Yale, I was asked by the Yale Corporation, which is the group, the governing body that oversees Yale University, and the Yale Corporation said, please do a report on the status of women at Yale, because women had been at Yale only 10 years, and they wanted to know, how was the integration? Was it working out? Was having women at Yale a good thing? So I headed up a study on that, and one of the findings was that a lot of Yale women in 1977 were having sex with their professors, that it was considered commonplace. I went to the Yale administration, I presented the report, nobody seemed to care. It was like the girl who had been date raped. Nobody cared. They said, well, that's just how things are. These are powerful men. It's okay. Don't worry about it. So instead of not worrying about it, we decided we needed to do something about it. So I organized with 4 other women and a male professor, and we filed suit in court in Connecticut, and we said that this behavior, where women who go to school or men who go to school and are sexually harassed, that's against the law. We formulated the term sexual harassment, and we said it's not acceptable. This produced a lot of anxiety. We filed the case. We got a lot of press attention because nobody had ever done this before, and a lot of people were really unhappy. And back then, to sue Yale University, which is a great university, seemed like something that no one should really do. So I didn't even want to do it, but how else could we get justice? We had to use the legal system. So we filed suit. Now what happened to me personally? There were threats, lots of threats. Remember, I'm only 21 years old at the time. I believe in Yale, it's a great institution, but I also believe in justice. So I got threats. A wife of one of the men who had raped a student who was on the faculty, she came to me and she actually had control over my transcripts and recommendation letters. And she said, I'm going to destroy you. If you don't drop this lawsuit, I'm going to destroy you because this is hurting my family. And at the time, I was applying to Yale and Harvard Law School. I was applying to be a Rhodes Scholar, a Marshall Scholar, and I was thinking my life is over. But I said, don't, and I fought against that. And then even Yale itself went around and said to people, remember 40 years ago, that I was a lesbian, which is why I was bringing the suit. Now, 40 years ago, for somebody to call someone a lesbian, that was not a compliment. They meant it as a slur. I was living with the man at the time who is now my husband. I was not a lesbian then or now. although I think it's a very good lifestyle choice. And they also told people that I was failing out of Yale, when in fact I was at the top of my class. I won that Rhodes Scholarship. Very few women had ever won them. I was in the second year of women who won them. I got into Harvard and Yale Law School. I won a Marshall Scholarship. So it was for me a hard thing to realize that this noble institution could play so dirty about something that seemed to me very important. Don't we want a way to stop this kind of behavior happening at universities? I also got feces in my Yale mailbox, and I got death threats. Now, I tell you this because that's the early type of online abuse that wasn't online, but abuse that's possible. And it happened, and the abuse happened, a lot of it, because it was anonymous. And what we have learned is that what people do anonymously, often they wouldn't do if they knew that other people were actually going to find it. The court held at the end that we were right, and that for a university to not stop sexual harassment was against the law. And that was the first case that started sexual harassment law in the United States and now in the rest of the world. Now, in 2015, I'm practicing law, and the internet, of course, is going on, and I'm headquartered in London, although I've also got offices in the States and other parts of the world. And we see the rise of revenge pornography. We see what happens when pictures, naked pictures of people, usually of women, are put on the internet and disclosed without their consent to other people. And so we thought something needs to be done about this. And again, when we first got started, people would say, well, it's the women's fault. If they let those pictures out and give them to men, it's not men's fault that they might use them against them. So they blame the women. We said we don't think so. And we were able to get a law passed in Britain so that right now, if you do this, you send naked pictures of someone and post them someplace like on the internet without that person's consent, that's illegal. We now have hundreds of people in jail in the United Kingdom for violating this crime. I will tell you one thing. Most of them are men. Yes, one might say, of course, but there are very many women who have done this also, and they're also sitting in jail now in England. So this is online abuse and cyberbullying. It's using the electronic facilities to harass and abuse a person, and often they're accompanied by threats. Cyberbullying can be, of course, extremely scary, but it also can kill. I want to tell you the story of Sally. I had a call one night in London from a woman in Kansas. She was in a dreadful state of upset. She said that she had a 14-year-old daughter who a few weeks before had come to her and explained, Mom, it's Friday night, I want to go with my friend Victoria, and we'd like to go out and have some fun. If I don't come home, I'm at Victoria's house. Victoria told her mother she was going out with Sally, and if she didn't come home, she was going to be at Sally's house. They go out, they meet up with their friends, 20 people in their class, men and women, maybe I should say boys and girls, because they're 14, and they go to a parent's house. The parents are upstairs having a cocktail party, but they send the kids downstairs with lots of liquor, and nobody checks on them all night long. The kids start to drink. Sally had never drank before, and in due course she passes out, paralytic drunk on the floor. She's with friends. These are the people she grew up with, who she loves. They know everything about each other. They decide it would be fun if they took off her clothes. They take off her clothes, and they decide then to insert bottles into her vagina. And they've got their iPhones, and they're filming this the whole time. The next morning, Sally wakes up, and she says to Victoria, what happened? Where are my clothes? I don't understand what's happened. Victoria says, don't worry about it. It was nothing. They go home. Over the weekend, Sally doesn't hear from anyone. There's no texting. Sunday, nothing. On Monday, she goes to school. People don't really talk to her much, which is unusual. Tuesday. On Wednesday, she gets the information, the video that's been going around the school of her total humiliation. She goes home. She goes into the house at 3. She has a mother who is home. The mother is literally making brownies. And her mother says, Sally, how was your day? And Sally stops and says, Mom, It was not a good day. And Sally goes upstairs, and her mother finds her 20 minutes later with hot brownies, and she finds that her daughter has killed herself. So she was 14. There was another very famous woman who called me from a famous law school. She had just won a great award, and she starts getting messages on her email that this person and other people say they're going to kill her, and they do worse things. They say to her, they're going to cut her nipples off. They're going to take a stick and insert it in her vagina in front of her children. They're going to cut off her labia. All sorts of absolutely unimaginable things get told to her. She's a strong woman. She's well known in society. Many of you will know this person. She calls me and she says, what am I going to do? We hire an ethical hacker. The ethical hacker comes back and finds out that the person who did it to her was allegedly her friend, another woman, 2 doors down from her in this very famous law school. She goes down the hall, and Clara says to her, she just sits in her office, looks at the professor who's done this and says, why? She doesn't even say why about what? The woman knows. She bursts out crying. And again, Clara says, why? And the woman says, I don't know. I don't know why I did it. I had a call just before I came from this woman who trolled Clara. She's now being cyberbullied and facing the same problem that she caused in Clara's life. Tomas was dating Victor. He sent naked pictures of himself to Victor, and of course, Victor sent naked pictures to Tomas. It's part of a dating ritual for many people these days. But the relationship didn't work out. So Victor decided he was angry, and he figured it was fair. So he posted Tomas's naked pictures on the internet, but he also put identifying characteristics. Tomas's, not just his full name, but his address and his internet contact details. All sorts of information on him, his telephone number, to his friends, to his work colleagues, to his families. Thomas's family no longer talks to him. They don't want to know him. Thomas has lost his job, and he's fallen into a deep depression, and he's been admitted into a psychiatric ward. He now says that life, as he has known it, is over. The life that he loved is gone. 1 in 8 people, Facebook says, have received non-consensual pornography on Facebook. 1 in 3 young people have received cyber threats. If people have a feminine username, they get 25 times more cyber threats than do those who have male names. So how do we make the internet safe? How do we stop this problem, but still keep the freedom on the internet that we treasure? So you can't say that. Usually if you go to the police, they say, just get off the internet. Leave it alone. Don't use it anymore. But for most of us, we earn our living on the internet. We need to be on the internet. It's not possible. So solution 1 is, if you're accused of something terrible, like degrading someone, harassing, bullying, threatening, then we have to have a way to crash through anonymity and find out who you are. We have to introduce and enforce criminal and civil laws that prevent and stop online harassment, threats, and bullying, much like the revenge porn law that I was instrumental in getting passed in the United Kingdom. We have to create cyber police and online abuse courts. Our legal system has to actually change, so we're in the modern world. 100 years ago, the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, was formed in the United States because there are new things around, new technologies called cars and telephones, and the individual states realized they couldn't combat crime. So the United States government decided to create a new agency, the FBI, to handle that crime. We now, 100 years later, need to have a cyber FBI, essentially. So here we are. And we should also, these cyber agencies need to have big budgets, and they need to coordinate internationally with other countries and to work together. Jail time and financial penalties for those convicted of online stalking and abuse should be applied. And online etiquette classes should be taught in schools, universities, even in prisons, because those people need to learn better how to behave themselves and throughout our communities. Those convicted of cybercrimes, their names should be published. To change attitudes, we have to make it uncool, so nobody who's really cool would do these things. An open discussion of online abuse has to happen, and support groups created for those who have been abused, because there's a lot of people who have been hurt this way. And we have to ban and educate people against violent video games. Right now, as many of you know, all the video games are filled with issues of violence against women who are maimed and raped and beaten up in the video game. That should be disallowed. Very importantly, online abuse must become a man's issue. The men have to embrace it and say, hey, we're not going to accept this anymore. The internet platforms like Google, all these have to be regulated. Right now, they are regulated. It's mandatory, and federal law in most countries that child pornography has to come down. They can't be posted on those platforms. And Google, Facebook, all of them, they comply instantly. They have to, or they suffer great consequences. And you have to make it easy for victims who find that their images or they're being abused online to stop it. They have to be empowered to stop it themselves. You can't wait for weeks. And then swift penalties have to be applied for online platforms who don't comply or assist in helping to take down these problems. Fake news has to be identified and removed from the internet. And I'm going to end with humor, because any social change, it always is going to happen and be a lot easier if there were humor. Victims are people we know, our daughters, and I had 2 daughters who were victims of this. I'm going to leave you with a very short story. I had 2 daughters who went to Yale University at the same time. Both very attractive, fun-loving. One a bit chestier than the other. There's a website platform that gets started. Some men think it's a great idea, and they call it Juicy Campus. And Juicy Campus is a platform to allow people to pose questions for the university community of Yale that can be discussed in a private way. So the question gets posted by one of the men: who is the more, and this is the word they used, who is the more fuckable of my daughters? One says the chestier one, or the not so chesty one, the long blonde hair, the short blonde hair, and there becomes a discussion that is so intense that the whole university is involved with this. And my daughters call up and they are humiliated and they feel degraded and they're upset. And they're strong women, but they're being analyzed and dissected as if they were pieces of meat, and they're just terrible. They say, Mom, can you send a letter? Can you file a lawsuit? Yeah, I can do all those things, but that's not going to stop the problem that exists right then. So they come up with an idea. They join with a lot of their male friends at Yale. They decide to load onto the internet site all sorts of feminist writings. So in this discussion of who's more fuckable, they start putting up on the website feminist writings, and they deluge the site, so much so that the whole website crashes because of the feminist writings that are on there. A letter comes from the Juicy Campus, people who own it, and they send a lawyer to say, cease and desist, you're going to be eligible for monetary damages, you're hurting this website. We have a right to have free discussions. We have a right to do what we want. My daughters keep loading in all their friends more feminist sites, and the whole thing gets put out of business. It's dead. Still, my daughters remember this and how humiliating it was. They now have a sense of humor about it. But I will note that the man who organized this website works now at Facebook at a very high level. I only hope that he's learned something about respect before he's gotten to Facebook and applies that lesson about respect at Facebook. Thank you for inviting me to speak. This is an area that needs all of our participation. I'm sure all of you know people or have been involved yourselves with these sorts of problems, and I hope we can stop them in a fair and good way. I thank you very much.